The ship moved through the darkness of space like a small metal fish swimming in an endless ocean. Inside, Admiral Park stood near the observation window and watched the stars pass by. She was 53 years old, with streaks in her black hair and calm eyes that had seen many difficult things. Today would be the most important day in human history. "Admiral, we are approaching the station," said Captain Minu from behind her. Nodded but did not turn around. She could already see it through the window. The Galactic Assembly Station was enormous. It was bigger than Earth's moon, a massive structure of metal and light that floated in the center of the galaxy. 200 species had built it together over 12,000 years. It was the heart of galactic civilization. And today, humanity would ask to join. The human ship named Hope of Earth was small compared to the vessels docked at the station. Saw ships the size of mountains, ships made of crystal, ships that seemed to be alive and breathing. Their little vessel looked like a toy next to these giants. "Remember," said to her delegation of 12 officers, "we are here to make friends. No matter what happens, we stay calm, we stay polite. We represent 8 billion people today." The delegation nodded. They were nervous. Every single one of them was nervous, but they hid it well. The docking was smooth. When the doors opened, was the first to step onto the station. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with metal. The corridors were wide enough for creatures of all sizes. She saw beings that walked on 2 legs, beings that floated, beings that crawled on dozens of limbs. Some were beautiful, some were terrifying. All of them stopped to stare at the humans. Heard whispers in languages she did not understand, but she understood the tone. It was the tone of curiosity mixed with something else, something like amusement. A floating creature made of blue light approached them. It spoke in perfect Korean, translated by some invisible technology. "You are the humans," it said. "The new species. Follow me to the assembly chamber." They followed. The assembly chamber was the largest room had ever seen. It was shaped like a bowl, with thousands of seats rising up in circles around a central platform. Each seat held a representative from a different species. Saw the tall beings made of living crystal that sparkled in the light. She saw the insect-like creatures with 4 arms and black eyes that showed no emotion. She saw hundreds of others, all watching, all waiting. The platform in the center was empty. That was where would stand. "Humans," announced a booming voice, "you may present your petition." Walked to the platform alone. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She could feel 10,000 eyes on her. She reached the center, took a breath, and began to speak. "Honored members of the Galactic Assembly," she said, her voice steady. "I am Park, representing the United Nations of Earth. Humanity has traveled far to stand before you today. We have achieved faster-than-light travel. We have built colonies on 3 worlds. We come to you not as conquerors, but as friends. We ask only for the chance to join your great civilization, to learn from you, and to share what we have learned." She paused. "We believe that together, we can build a better galaxy." For a moment there was silence. Then the laughter began. It started with their crystal bodies vibrated with a sound like breaking glass. Then the joined in, their mandibles clicking in what realized was their version of laughter. Soon, the entire chamber was laughing. Thousands of aliens laughing at humanity. Stood still, she did not move, she did not react. "Faster-than-light travel," said a representative, still laughing. "We achieved that 11,000 years ago. Your ships are like wooden boats compared to ours." 3 colonies, clicked a, "We have 17,000 worlds. You are children playing in the dirt." "Look at them," said another voice. "Soft bodies, short lives. They die after only 100 years. What can such creatures offer us?" The laughter continued. Felt her face grow hot, but she kept her expression calm. Behind her she heard Minu shift angrily, but she gave him a small signal with her hand. "Stay still. Stay calm." The assembly speaker, a massive creature that looked like a living shadow, raised what might have been a hand. The petition is, it said simply, humanity is not ready for membership. You may return in 1,000 years when you have proven yourselves worthy. More laughter. 1,000 years, someone shouted, if they survive that long. Waited for the laughter to die down. The speaker looked at her with what might have been pity. You may speak for 30 seconds before you leave, it said. 30 seconds. After traveling so far, after hopping so much, they gave her 30 seconds. Looked around the chamber slowly. She looked at the, still glittering with amusement. She looked at their black eyes cold and dismissive. She looked at all of them, these ancient species who had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of that massive room. We came seeking friendship, she said. We came with open hands and open hearts. We asked for nothing but the chance to stand beside you as equals. She paused. You have given us your answer. You have shown us what you think of humanity, and we will remember. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her delegation followed. The chamber was silent now. The laughter had stopped. Something in its voice had made them uncomfortable, though they could not say why. At the door stopped. She turned back one final time. We will remember, she repeated, how we were received. Then she left. On the journey home, sat alone in her quarters. Minyu came to check on her. Admiral, he said softly, I am sorry, they were cruel. Looked up at him. To his surprise, she was not crying, she was not angry. There was something strange in her eyes, something cold and patient. Do you know what I saw in that chamber, Minyu? She asked. Arrogance, he replied. Yes, but also something else. I saw fear. Minyu frowned. Fear. They were laughing at us. People laugh when they are nervous, said. When they see something they do not understand. When they see something that might someday become a threat. She stood up and looked out at the stars. They laughed because we are small and weak, but they also laughed because deep down in some ancient part of their minds they know that small things can grow, weak things can become strong. She turned to face him. We will not ask again, Minyu. We will not beg for their approval. We will go home and we will grow and we will become something they cannot laugh at. And then, smiled, it was not a happy smile. And then we will return, not to ask for a seat at their table, but to build a table of our own. She looked back at the stars. Tell the crew to set course for Earth. We have work to do. And tell the people back home to prepare for a long silence, because from this day forward, we will not speak to the galaxy again until we have something worth saying. The ship turned toward Earth. Behind them, the Galactic Assembly continued its business, already forgetting about the soft little mammals who had dared to dream of equality. They would not forget for long. 50 years after the humiliation at the Galactic Assembly, Park died peacefully in her sleep. She was 103 years old. Her body was buried in the city where she was born, overlooking the sea she had loved since childhood. Thousands of people attended her funeral. They called her the mother of human pride. But her work did not die with her. Her grandson, Park, stood at her grave on the day of the burial. He was 35 years old, tall and serious, with the same calm eyes his grandmother had possessed. In his pocket was a letter she had written to him years ago, when she knew her time was coming to an end. Do not let them forget what was done to us, the letter said. But more importantly, do not let anger make us stupid. Be patient. Be clever. Build something so powerful that when we return, they will have no choice but to listen. Read that letter every morning for the next 50 years. By 2397, he had become the leader of the United Human Directorate, the new government that controlled all of humanity's worlds. Under his leadership, the Silence Protocol continued. All communications with the outside galaxy were stopped. Human ships avoided contact with alien vessels. Human colonies hid themselves from galactic sensors. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity simply disappeared. The Galactic Assembly noticed, of course. Some species wondered what had happened to the soft mammals who had come begging for membership, but most of them simply forgot. Humanity was not important. Humanity was not a threat. There were bigger things to worry about. And so the galaxy ignored humanity. That was their greatest mistake. Deep in the heart of Earth, in a research facility hidden beneath the mountains of Korea, Doctor worked on something that would change everything. She was 42 years old, small and thin, with messy hair and glasses that were always dirty. She forgot to eat. She forgot to sleep. She thought only about physics. For 20 years, she had been studying the fabric of space itself. The Galactic Assembly's ships used something called hyperspace to travel faster than light. It was impressive technology, but it was slow. A journey across the galaxy took weeks, sometimes months. Believed she could do better. The universe is not flat, she explained to her team one night, drawing diagrams on a board. It is folded, like a piece of paper. If you want to travel from one corner to another, you could walk across the paper. That is what hyperspace does. But what if you could fold the paper? What if you could make the two corners touch? Her team stared at her. That is impossible, said one young scientist. Smiled. They said the same thing about faster-than-light travel 11,000 years ago, and yet here we are. It took her 5 more years to prove her theory. It took another 10 to build a working engine. But on the morning of her 67th birthday, watched the first human ship fold space and travel from Earth to the edge of the galaxy in 3 hours. 3 hours, a journey that would take the fastest assembly ship 2 months. Sent a message to Park, who was now an old man but still sharp as a blade. It works, the message said. We can go anywhere and they will never see us coming. While conquered space, her colleague conquered weapons. Was the opposite of in every way. Where was quiet and thoughtful was loud and passionate. Where forgot to eat, ate too much. They had been friends since university and they argued constantly about everything. But when it came to their work, they understood each other perfectly. The Galactic Assembly's weapons used energy. Lasers, plasma, nuclear fire. Their shields were designed to absorb and deflect energy attacks. It was a system that had worked for thousands of years. Decided to break that system. Energy can be stopped, she said during a presentation to the military leaders. But what about mass? What about simple, solid objects moving at incredible speeds? She showed them her design, kinetic accelerators, weapons that could fire small metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. No energy signature, no warning, just pure, unstoppable force. Their shields cannot handle this, explained. They were never designed for it. One of our slugs could punch through a battleship like a needle through paper. The military leaders were impressed, but they had concerns. If we build these weapons, said General, we are preparing for war. Is that what we want? Looked at him with hard eyes. 50 years ago, my grandmother was in that delegation. She stood behind Admiral Park when they laughed at us. She never forgot that sound. Neither have I, she pointed to her designs. I am not building weapons for war. I am building weapons so that no one will ever laugh at us again. General was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. Build them, he said. Was not a man who enjoyed war. He had been a soldier all his life, but he had seen enough death to know its true cost. When Park asked him to build a secret fleet, he agreed only because he understood what was at stake. We need ships that cannot be seen, told him. Ships that can appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. Ships that will make our enemies afraid. Built those ships, he called them the Ghost Fleet. For 30 years, he worked in secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belts of distant systems. He trained crews in perfect silence. He tested weapons on empty moons where no one could see. By 2447, exactly 100 years after the humiliation at the assembly, the Ghost Fleet was ready. 5,000 warships, each one equipped with dimensional folding engines and kinetic accelerators. 5,000 invisible predators, waiting in the dark. Was 78 years old when he reported to the new leader of humanity. I.M. Park had died 2 years earlier, but his legacy continued. "The fleet is ready," said. "We can strike anywhere in the galaxy within hours. No one knows we exist. No one suspects what we have become." I.M. was a young woman, only 42, but she had been trained for this role since birth. She was Park's great-great-granddaughter, and she carried the weight of her ancestors' memory. "We will not strike first," said carefully. "That is not who we are. But if anyone threatens us, if anyone tries to hurt our people, we will respond." She looked out the window at the stars. 100 years of silence," she said softly. 100 years of building. My great-great-grandmother would be proud." "She would," agreed. Turned to face him. "Now we wait. We continue to hide. We continue to build. And when the galaxy finally notices us again, when they come to laugh at us or attack us or dismiss us, we will be ready. And if they come in peace." Smiled, and it was the same smile her ancestor had worn a century ago. "Then we will welcome them. But I do not think they will come in peace, General. I think they will come with arrogance as they always have. And on that day, the silence will end." She looked back at the stars. "On that day, they will finally understand what humanity has become." In the darkness of space, 5,000 ships waited in perfect silence. Their crews were patient. Their weapons were ready. And across the galaxy, the species that had laughed at humanity went about their business, completely unaware of the storm that was coming. The century of silence was almost over. The mining colony on was small and unimportant. It sat on a rocky moon at the edge of explored space, home to only 3,000 humans who spent their days digging for rare minerals in the cold darkness. They were simple people living simple lives. They wanted nothing but peace. Was the colony administrator. She was 51 years old, a former engineer who had taken the job because she liked the quiet. She liked watching the stars at night. She liked the honest work of mining. She had never wanted adventure or excitement. Adventure and excitement found her anyway. It was a normal morning when the sensors detected the ships. Was drinking tea in her office, reviewing mining reports, when her communications officer burst through the door. "Administrator," the young man said, his face pale with fear, "we have contacts, 40 ships. They just appeared at the edge of the system." Set down her tea. "What kind of ships?" "Ma'am, warships." Felt her stomach turn cold. They were one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They treated other species like animals, enslaving them or destroying them as they pleased. And now 40 of their warships were heading toward her small, defenseless colony. She stood up slowly. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them what is happening, and connect me to the commander." "Ma'am, we should evacuate." "We have 3,000 people and 2 transport ships," said calmly. "We cannot evacuate. Our only hope is to talk our way out of this. Now connect me." The young officer nodded and ran to obey. Walked to the communications room. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to be still. She thought of her grandmother who had lived through wars on Earth. She thought of Admiral Park, who had faced an entire galaxy's laughter without flinching. If they could be brave, so could she. The screen flickered to life. A face appeared, all black eyes and clicking mandibles. It was hideous by human standards, but did not let her disgust show. "I am administrator of 442, she said. "Why are warships approaching my colony?" The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Approaching? We are not approaching, little mammal. We are arriving. This moon belongs to the Empire now. Your colony is in our space." "This moon is not in your space," replied. "We are outside territory by 3 light years. Our presence here is legal under galactic law." Galactic law, the commander clicked his mandibles. Galactic law is for the weak. The strong take what they want. And we want this moon. Its minerals will fuel our ships for centuries. Felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. And what of my people? 3,000 humans live here. Slaves are always useful, the commander said. Your people will serve the empire. Those who resist will die. Those who obey will live. It is a simple choice. Stared at the screen for a long moment. She thought about begging. She thought about threatening. She thought about all the things she could say to change this monster's mind. Then she thought about humanity's 100 years of silence. She thought about the ghost fleet, hidden somewhere in the darkness. She thought about the message she had just sent to Earth. And she made her choice. Commander, she said quietly, I will give you one warning. Leave this system now. Do not return. If you do not leave, you will regret it. The laughed, it was an ugly sound. You threaten us. You, a soft little mammal with no ships and no weapons. We have 40 warships. What do you have? Smiled. I have patience, she said, and I have friends you cannot see. She ended the transmission. 3 hours later, the fleet entered orbit around the moon. Their weapons powered up. Their shuttles prepared to land. The commander broadcast a final message to the colony. You have 10 minutes to surrender. After that, we will begin bombardment. Gathered her people in the central dome. Women, men, children, miners, engineers, teachers. They looked at her with fear in their eyes. I will not lie to you, she told them. I do not know if help will come in time, but I know this, we are not alone. Humanity is not weak anymore. Whatever happens today, the galaxy will learn that attacking humans has a price. An old miner raised his hand. What if help doesn't come? Looked at him. Then we die with dignity. We do not surrender to slavers. We do not beg. We are human beings and we do not bow to monsters. The crowd was silent. Then slowly they nodded. They understood. The 10 minutes passed. The commander prepared to give the order to fire. And then the sky tore open. One moment there was nothing around the fleet but empty space. The next moment there were ships, human ships, 20 of them appearing from nowhere as if they had stepped through an invisible door. The commander stared at his sensors in disbelief. Where did they come from? He demanded. How is this possible? His officers had no answer. One of the human ships broadcast a message. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She was young, with short black hair and cold eyes. Her name was Captain Sora Han, and she commanded the destroyer Silent Blade. Fleet, she said, you were warned. You did not listen. Now you will face the consequences. The commander tried to respond, but before he could speak, the human ships opened fire. It was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They were not designed for the kinetic slugs that slammed into their hulls at a fraction of light speed. The first volley tore through 3 warships like they were made of paper. The second volley destroyed 5 more. By the time they managed to return fire, half their fleet was already debris. And their lasers did nothing. The human ships were too fast, too maneuverable. They danced through the formations like ghosts, appearing here, striking there, vanishing before the enemy could react. Within 20 minutes, all 40 warships were destroyed or disabled. Thousands of soldiers were dead, and not a single human ship had been scratched. Captain Sora Han broadcast a final message, not to the destroyed fleet, but to the galaxy. This is the human coalition ship Silent Blade. A war fleet attempted to attack a peaceful human colony. They were warned to leave. They refused. They have been neutralized. She paused. Let this be a message to all who would threaten humanity. We did not start this fight, but we finished it. We will always finish it. On the surface of 442, watched the burning wreckage of the fleet fall through the sky like dying stars. Around her, her people cheered and cried and hugged each other. She did not cheer, She only smiled. "Thank you, grandmother," she whispered to the sky. "Thank you, Admiral Park. You told us to be patient. You told us to be strong. We listened." The news of the defeat spread across the galaxy in hours. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency meeting. They demanded explanations. The other fleets pulled back to their borders, afraid. But when they tried to contact humanity, they received only silence. The humans had made their point. They had shown a hint of their power, and then they had vanished again, like ghosts returning to the shadows. The galaxy was afraid now. They did not know where the human ships had come from. They did not know how many there were. They did not know what humanity wanted. All they knew was that the species they had laughed at, the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak, had just destroyed 40 warships without taking a single loss. And somewhere in the darkness, more of those impossible ships were waiting. The silence continued, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence of a predator watching its prey. And the prey was beginning to understand. 6 months after the destruction of the fleet, the Galactic Assembly gathered for its greatest celebration in 1,000 years. The Grand Summit was held once every century, a festival where all 300 member species came together to celebrate their unity, their power, and their shared history. This year, the summit was hosted on a beautiful planet of crystal mountains and silver seas. Millions of aliens traveled there from across the galaxy. The most powerful leaders, the richest merchants, the greatest scientists, all gathered in one place to remind themselves how magnificent they were. They had almost forgotten about the humans. Almost. The Empire had demanded justice for their destroyed fleet, but the Assembly had done nothing. They had conducted investigations but found nothing. The humans had vanished again, hidden somewhere in the vast emptiness of space. Many species believed the defeat was a fluke, a lucky victory by primitive mammals who had stumbled upon advanced technology. Surely it could not happen again. On the third day of the summit, while the Assembly leaders dined in a crystal palace under 3 moons, the sky changed. It started as a shimmer, like heat rising from hot stone. Then the shimmer became a tear, and through the tear came ships. Human ships. 1,000 of them. They appeared in perfect formation, surrounding the planet in a ring of metal and fire. They did not attack. They did not move. They simply hung there in the darkness, silent and waiting. The celebration stopped. The music died. 300 species looked up at the sky and felt something they had not felt in thousands of years. Fear. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dawn of Humanity. He was 63 years old, a soldier who had trained his entire life for this moment. Around him, his crew worked in calm silence, monitoring sensors, checking weapons, waiting for orders. Looked at the planet below. He could see the lights of the crystal cities, the ships frantically launching from spaceports, the chaos spreading across a world that had never known true danger. "Open a channel," he said quietly. "All frequencies, every language." His communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Took a breath. He thought of his grandfather, who had been a young officer in Admiral Park's delegation 100 years ago. He thought of all the stories he had heard about that day, the laughter, the humiliation, the quiet promise of return. Now it was time to fulfill that promise. "This is Admiral of the Human Coalition," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I am speaking to the Galactic Assembly and to all species who can hear this message." On the planet below, every screen lit up with his face. Every speaker carried his words. The leaders of 300 species stopped what they were doing and listened. 100 years ago, continued, humanity came to you asking for friendship. We wanted only to join your civilization, to learn from you, and to share what we had learned. We asked for nothing but the chance to stand beside you as equals. He paused. You laughed at us. You called us primitive, irrelevant. You did not even let us finish speaking. You gave us 30 seconds to respond, then sent us away like beggars." In the Crystal Palace, the High Council exchanged uneasy glances. The representatives buzzed with anger, but no one spoke. Everyone was watching the human on the screen. "We went home," said. "We did not complain, we did not threaten, we simply went silent. For 100 years we built. We learned. We grew. Not because we wanted revenge. Not because we planned to conquer you, but because we understood something that you have forgotten." His eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer. "This galaxy respects only strength. You taught us that, so we became strong." He gestured, and the view switched to show the fleet surrounding the planet. 1,000 warships, bristling with weapons, their hulls dark against the stars. "This is not our entire fleet," said. "This is not even a quarter of it. We have ships in every corner of this galaxy, watching, waiting. We have weapons you cannot imagine and defenses you cannot break. We built all of this in 100 years, while you laughed and forgot about us." The High Leader stood up, her crystal body trembling with rage. "This is an act of war," she shouted. "You dare to threaten the Assembly." His face remained calm. "We dare nothing. We threaten nothing. We have not fired a single weapon. We have not harmed a single being. We came here only to deliver a message." He leaned forward slightly. "Humanity is no longer asking for a seat at your table. We do not want your approval. We do not need your permission. We are building our own table, our own alliance, our own future. Any species that wishes to join us as true equals is welcome. Any species that wishes to be left alone will be left alone." He paused, and his voice grew colder. "But any species that threatens us, that attacks our colonies, that tries to enslave our people, will learn what they learned 6 months ago. We did not start that fight. We will not start any fight, but we will finish every fight that comes to us." The assembly chamber was silent. No one laughed now. No one made jokes about primitive mammals. "We will stay here for 1 hour," said. "Not to threaten, not to demand, simply to let you see what we have become. Look at our ships, study them, try to understand them. And then ask yourselves, was it wise to laugh at us? Was it wise to dismiss us? Was it wise to make enemies of a species that builds things like this in only 100 years? He smiled slightly. 1 hour, and then we will leave, and you will never see us again unless you choose to seek us out. The silence ends today. What comes next is up to you." The transmission ended. For 1 hour, the Galactic Assembly watched the human fleet. They scanned the ships with every sensor they had. They analyzed the weapons, the shields, the engines. And the more they learned, the more afraid they became. The human technology was 3 generations ahead of anything in the assembly. Their engines were faster. Their weapons were deadlier. Their ships were harder to detect. In 1 century, humanity had gone from wooden boats to the most advanced fleet in galactic history. How was it possible? The High Leader demanded answers from her scientists. They had none. The commanders shouted for attack plans. Their strategists could offer nothing but defeat. Every simulation, every calculation, every model showed the same result. If the assembly fought humanity, the assembly would lose. When the hour ended, the human ships began to vanish. One by one, they folded space and disappeared, leaving nothing behind but empty sky and terrified aliens. The last ship to leave was the dawn of humanity. Admiral stood at his window, looking down at the one last time. "Admiral," said his first officer, "Captain, the fleet has withdrawn. We are ready to depart." Nodded. "Do you think they understood?" asked. Was silent for a moment. "Some of them," he said finally. "Some of them understood, the smart ones, the ones who remember what it was like to be small and weak. They will come to us. And the others? The others will continue to be arrogant. They will convince themselves that this was a trick, that we are not really strong, that they can still control the galaxy as they always have." Shook his head. "They will be wrong, and eventually they will learn. He turned away from the window. "Take us home, Captain. Our work here is done." The dawn of humanity folded space and vanished. Behind them, the Galactic Assembly was in chaos. Species shouted at each other, blamed each other, demanded action. But beneath the anger and the fear, something else was happening. Small species, weak species, species that had been mocked and ignored just as humanity had been, they were whispering among themselves. They were asking questions. What if we joined the humans? What if we left this assembly that has never respected us? What if we built something new? The silence had ended, and in its place, something else was beginning to grow. Hope. 1 year after the demonstration at the galaxy had changed forever. It started slowly. A few weeks after Admiral's fleet disappeared, a small transport ship arrived at Earth's orbital station. On board was a delegation from a gentle species of four-armed beings who had been treated as servants by the Assembly for 3,000 years. They came with a simple request. "We wish to join you," their leader said. "We have been laughed at and used and ignored for too long. If you will have us, we will stand with humanity." The human coalition welcomed them. Then came a race of aquatic beings who had been stolen by the centuries ago. Then the small gray creatures with brilliant minds but weak bodies, who had been forced to work as scientists for species that despised them. Then dozens more, then hundreds. Within 1 year, 37 species had left the Galactic Assembly and joined the human coalition. They were not the powerful species. They were not the wealthy ones. They were the forgotten ones, the mocked ones, the ones who had suffered under the old order and dreamed of something better. And humanity welcomed them all. The first coalition summit was held on Earth, in a great hall built on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. It was a clear spring day, with blue skies and gentle winds, and representatives from 40 species sat together as equals. At the head of the table sat I.M., president of the Human Coalition and great-great-granddaughter of Park. She was 43 years old now, calm and confident, with her ancestors' eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said to the assembled delegates. "I know that for many of you this journey was difficult. You have left behind everything you knew to join something new and uncertain. You have taken a great risk." She looked around the table at the strange and beautiful faces watching her. "But I promise you this, in the human coalition there will be no masters and no servants. There will be no species that commands and species that obey. We are all equal here. Every voice matters. Every life has value." A delegate raised one of her 4 hands. "President I.M., the Assembly says we are traitors. They say we have betrayed galactic unity. They say humanity will betray us, just as the strong have always betrayed the weak." Nodded. "They are afraid," she said. "For 12,000 years they have ruled this galaxy through fear and force. They have convinced themselves that this is the only way, that the strong must always dominate the weak. They cannot imagine anything else." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the ocean stretching to the horizon, blue and endless. "Humanity was nearly destroyed many times in our history," she said. "We fought terrible wars against each other. We almost ruined our planet. We came close to extinction more than once. But we learned. We learned that cooperation is stronger than domination. We learned that lifting others up makes everyone stronger, not weaker." She turned back to face the delegates. "That is what we offer you, not control, not protection in exchange for obedience. Simply partnership. We will help you and you will help us, and together we will build something the galaxy has never seen before." The hall was silent for a moment. Then the delegate stood up. "Then we are with you," she said, "whatever comes." One by one the other delegates stood. All 37 species. They stood together, united, and in that moment something new was born. The Galactic Assembly did not take this well. They demanded that the coalition be dissolved. The threatened war. Ancient alliances crumbled as species took sides. For a few tense months, it seemed like the galaxy might tear itself apart. Then the Assembly sent an envoy to Earth. The envoy was a named crystalline voice of the deep waters. She was old, even by standards, and she had served the Assembly for over 1,000 years. She came alone, on a small ship, carrying a message from the Assembly's leaders. Received her in the same hall where the coalition had been born. "You may speak," said. "We will listen. That is more than you gave us." The flinched at the words, recognizing the echo of that day a century ago. "President, she said, her crystal voice chiming softly, "I am here to request peace talks. The Assembly does not wish for war. We do not wish for conflict. We wish only for stability." "Stability?" Raised an eyebrow. "You mean the stability where you rule and everyone else obeys? The stability where species like the serve and species like the take whatever they want?" The envoy was silent for a moment. "I was there," she said finally. 100 years ago. I was in the chamber when Admiral Park came seeking friendship. I was one of those who laughed." His expression did not change. "I have thought about that day many times since," the envoy continued. "I have wondered what would have happened if we had welcomed you instead of mocking you, if we had treated you with respect instead of contempt. Perhaps we would not be here now, afraid and divided, watching our alliance crumble." She looked with something that might have been regret. "I cannot change the past, but I can say this: I was wrong. We were wrong, and if you will give us the chance, we would like to try to do better." Studied the ancient for a long time. "Trying to do better is not enough," she said finally. "Words are not enough. If the Assembly wants peace with the coalition, it must prove it through actions. Free the species you have enslaved. Return the worlds you have stolen. Treat all beings as equals, not as resources to be used." "That would take centuries." "Then you had better start soon." The envoy nodded slowly. She understood. This was not a negotiation between equals. This was humanity setting the terms, just as the Assembly had once set terms for them. The difference was that humanity's terms were not about domination. They were about justice. "I will carry your message to the Assembly," the envoy said. "I cannot promise they will accept, but I will try." "That is all we ask," replied. "That is all we have ever asked, the chance to try." Far from the great halls and political meetings, in a small house overlooking the sea an old woman sat in a garden and watched the stars. Park was 142 years old. Advanced medicine had kept her alive far beyond what anyone expected, but she knew her time was running out. Her body was tired. Her mind was slowing. Soon, she would join her parents and grandparents in whatever came after death. But not yet, not today. Her great-great-granddaughter had come to visit, sat beside her, holding her wrinkled hand. "We did it," grandmother said softly. "We built something new, 40 species standing together as equals. The Assembly is afraid of us now. They want peace." Smiled, her voice was weak, but her eyes were bright. "I always knew we would," she said. "Even on that day when they laughed at us, I knew. Humanity has always been underestimated. We have always been told we are too small, too weak, too young, and we have always proven them wrong." She looked up at the stars. "Do you know what I remember most from that day? It was not the laughter. It was the look in their eyes when I told them we would remember. For just a moment, just a heartbeat, they were afraid. They knew, deep down, that they had made a mistake." Squeezed her hand. "You changed everything, grandmother. You showed us the way." "No," said gently. "I only planted a seed. You are the ones who grew it into a forest. You and your father and your grandmother and everyone who worked and sacrificed and believed." She closed her eyes. "I am so proud of all of you." They sat together in silence, watching the stars turn overhead. The same stars that ancestors had watched for thousands of years. The same stars that humanity now traveled freely, no longer begging for permission, no longer asking for approval. Somewhere out there, the Coalition fleet patrolled the borders of human space. Somewhere out there, 37 species lived in peace under human protection. Somewhere out there, the old order was crumbling and something new was rising in its place. Did not need to see it all. She had done her part. 3 weeks later, she died in her sleep, with a smile on her face. They buried her next to the sea, in the city where she was born. Leaders from 40 species attended the funeral. They called her the mother of the Coalition, the woman who stood silent, the first admiral of humanity's pride. But standing at the grave with tears on her cheeks, called her something simpler. Goodbye, grandmother. Thank you for teaching us to be patient. Thank you for teaching us to be strong. Thank you for showing us that dignity is worth more than approval, and that true power is not in forcing others to bow, but in lifting them up to stand beside us. She looked up at the blue sky, the same sky her ancestor had looked at 142 years ago. We will never forget you, and we will never forget what you taught us. She turned and walked away, ready to lead humanity into its future. Behind her, the waves whispered against the shore, and the wind carried the sound across the water, across the world, across the stars. The silence was over. The story of humanity was just beginning. The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they answered that call by becoming something the galaxy desperately needed but never appreciated: peacekeepers. Admiral Park Jinnah stood alone on the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn, the largest warship humanity had ever built. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from battles she wished she could forget. Through the massive window, she watched the distant glow of the nebula, a beautiful cloud of purple and gold gas that stretched across 1,000 light years. Somewhere inside that nebula, her fleet had just finished another war that was not their own. Behind her, the door slid open. She did not turn around. She already knew who it was. Commander walked to stand beside her. He was younger than her by 15 years, but his eyes looked old. They had seen too much death. He carried a tablet in his hands, and she knew it contained more bad news. It always did. "The final count is in," said quietly. 42 ships destroyed, 9,317 dead, another 12,000 wounded. Jinnah closed her eyes. 9,000 lives. 9,000 families who would receive messages telling them their loved ones were never coming home. 9,000 funerals on Earth and the colony worlds. 9,000 reasons to ask the same question she had been asking for 20 years. Why? And though she asked, they have agreed to return to their original borders. The Crescent Assembly is satisfied. The Council has declared the conflict resolved. Paused. They are already planning a celebration on the Council station. We are not invited. Jinnah laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Of course they were not invited. Humanity never was. For 300 years they had bled and died to keep the peace between species who hated each other. They had sacrificed their children on alien worlds with strange skis. They had given everything. And in return, the galaxy gave them nothing. She remembered her first day at the Galactic Council 30 years ago. She had been a young captain then, proud and hopeful. She believed humanity could make a difference. She believed the other species would eventually see humans as equals, as partners, as friends. She had been so foolish. The Council was made up of 12 species, each one older than humanity by thousands of years. They had technology humans could barely understand. They had empires that stretched across hundreds of star systems. And they looked at humanity the way a rich man looks at a beggar, with pity, with disgust, and with the quiet belief that some creatures were simply born to serve. "There is another message," said. He handed her the tablet. Jinnah read it slowly. The swarm was expanding again. They had consumed 3 small civilizations in the past year, adding their populations to the endless hive. The council was concerned. The council wanted humanity to intervene. "What resources are they offering?" Jinnah asked. "None." "What support?" "None." "What payment for our soldiers' lives?" Shook his head. "They are citing the peacekeeping accord of 2847. They say it is our obligation to maintain galactic stability. They say this is what humans agreed to do." Jinnah remembered that accord. She had read it many times. Humanity had signed it during their first years in the galactic community, when they were desperate for acceptance, when they would have agreed to anything. The accord said that humanity would serve as peacekeepers in exchange for protection and trade rights. But the protection never came, and the trade rights were so limited they were almost worthless. For 300 years, humanity had kept their side of the agreement. The galaxy had not. "Admiral," said carefully, "there is growing anger back home. The Colonial Assembly has been meeting in secret. They are talking about withdrawal." Jinnah nodded. She had heard the rumors. After 3 centuries of being treated like servants, humanity was finally starting to ask if it was worth it. The younger generation did not remember the early days of hope. They only remembered the endless wars, the countless funerals, the constant disrespect. "Do you know what the ambassador said to me last week?" Jinnah asked. "Waited." "She said that humans breed fast, so our losses do not matter as much. She said we should be grateful for the opportunity to serve higher civilizations." Jinnah's hands tightened into fists. "She said this to my face, while wearing jewels that cost more than a human colony makes in a year, while my soldiers were dying to protect her trade routes." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. Jinnah turned away from the stars and walked to her command chair. She sat down heavily, feeling every one of her 53 years. On the screen before her, messages were piling up. Requests for help, demands for intervention, reminders of duty and obligation and sacrifice. She thought about her daughter, who was 7 years old and lived on Earth with her grandmother. Jinnah had missed last 3 birthdays. She had missed her first day of school. She had missed so many moments that she could never get back. And for what? For a galaxy that would never say thank you. "Send a message to Earth Command," Jinnah said finally. Her voice was calm, but there was iron beneath it. "Tell them I support withdrawal. Tell them I will testify before the Assembly if needed. Tell them," she paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them I am tired of watching my people die for those who consider us beneath them." His eyes widened. "Admiral, are you certain? The Council will not react well." "Let them react however they wish. What will they do? Fight us? They have forgotten how to fight. That is why they need us." The decision moved faster than anyone expected. Within a month, the Colonial Assembly had voted. Within 3 months, Earth's government had made it official. Within 6 months, every human ship, station, and outpost in Council space had been evacuated. Jinnah was there for the final moment. She stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn as it crossed the boundary into human-controlled space. Behind them, the beacon network went dark. The communication relays shut down. The borders sealed. 300 years of service ended in a single day. The Council sent furious messages at first. They demanded humanity return. They threatened sanctions. They warned of consequences, but humanity did not respond. The messages grew more desperate over time. They became pleas instead of demands. They became offers instead of threats. Still, humanity remained silent. On Earth, life went on. People returned to their normal lives. Soldiers came home to families who had waited too long. Children grew up without the shadow of distant wars hanging over them. Jinnah retired to a small house by the ocean, where she could hear the waves and watch the sun set over water instead of stars. Her daughter came to live with her. They had breakfast together every morning. They walked on the beach every evening. For the first time in 30 years, Jinnah felt something she had almost forgotten: peace. But sometimes, late at night, she would look up at the sky and wonder what was happening out there. She wondered if the galaxy missed them yet. She wondered if they understood what they had lost. She would find out soon enough. Everyone would. Because humanity had walked away. And without them, the galaxy was about to remember what war really meant. Counselor of the Collective had laughed when humanity left. She was ancient by human standards, nearly 400 years old, with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight and eyes that held centuries of arrogance. She had served on the Galactic Council for 150 years, and in all that time, she had never once considered humans as anything more than useful tools. "Let them go," she had told her colleagues on the day of withdrawal. "They are emotional creatures. They will calm down in a cycle or two. They need our markets, our technology, our approval. They will come crawling back, and when they do, we will remind them of their place." She was wrong. One cycle passed, then two, then 5. Humanity did not return. Their borders remained sealed. Their communications stayed silent. And slowly, so slowly that no one noticed at first, the galaxy began to fall apart. It started with small things. A trade dispute between two minor species that would normally have been resolved in days stretched into months. A border conflict that human diplomats would have ended with a single meeting grew into a full war. Pirate attacks along the neutral corridor, which human patrols had always suppressed, increased by 300%. Ambassador Minu had been one of the last humans to leave Council space. He was 62 years old, a career diplomat who had spent 40 years trying to build bridges between humanity and the galaxy. He had believed, truly believed, that patience and kindness would eventually win respect. He had been wrong too. On his last day on Council Station, he had visited A's office to say goodbye. She had not even looked up from her desk. "Close the door on your way out," she had said, as if dismissing a servant. "And tell your people not to expect us to welcome them back easily. They will need to earn our trust again." Minu had said nothing. He had simply walked away, carrying 30 years of insults and humiliations with him. Now he lived in quiet retirement on Nu, a colony world far from Earth, where the grass was blue and the sky was always orange at sunset. He spent his days gardening and reading. He tried not to think about the past. But the past would not leave him alone. His daughter served on a border patrol ship near the edge of human space. She sent him messages every week, telling him about her life, her crew, her duties. But lately, her messages had become darker. "The refugees are getting worse," she wrote in her latest transmission. "Yesterday, we found a ship with 3,000 civilians. They had been drifting for 2 months. Half of them were dead. The survivors begged us to let them in. They said there had been destroyed by the Crescent Assembly. They said there was nowhere else to go." Minu read the message twice. The and the Crescent Assembly had been enemies for 1,000 years, but humanity had always kept them apart. Human diplomats had negotiated treaties. Human ships had patrolled the borders. Human soldiers had died to maintain a peace that neither side truly wanted. Without humanity, that peace had lasted less than a year. "What did you do?" Minu wrote back to his daughter. "We gave them food and medical supplies," replied. "Then we sent them back. Those are our orders. No one enters human space. No one." Minu closed his eyes. He understood the orders. He even agreed with them in a way. Humanity had given enough. They had no obligation to save those who had treated them so badly. But still, the thought of 3,000 desperate people being turned away made his heart ache. On Council Station, the situation grew worse every day. A watched the reports come in with growing horror. The swarm, which humanity had contained for 2 centuries, was expanding faster than anyone had predicted. They had consumed the entire Federation in just 6 months. 12 billion lives gone, added to the endless hive. The Council met in emergency session after emergency session, but they could not agree on anything. They blamed the Crescent Assembly. The Assembly blamed the blamed everyone. Old alliances crumbled. New enemies emerged. Species that had not fought in 1,000 years suddenly remembered ancient grudges that human peacekeepers had helped them forget. "We need to do something," the representative said during one particularly chaotic meeting. "Though we'll reach our space in 2 years, we do not have the military strength to stop them." "Then build more ships," a snapped. "With what resources? Our economy has collapsed since the trade routes became unsafe. Half our merchant fleet has been destroyed by pirates." "Then ask the humans for help." "We have asked, we have begged, they do not answer." A slammed her hand on the table. "Then we will make them answer. Send a diplomatic ship to their border. Send 10 ships. Send 100. They cannot ignore us forever." But humanity could ignore them, and they did. The diplomatic ships that arrived at human borders were met with polite but firm refusals. Human patrol vessels would approach, deliver supplies if the visitors were in distress, and then escort them back to Council space. No negotiations, no discussions, no exceptions. On New, Minyu watched the news reports from Council space. He saw cities burning on worlds he had once visited. He saw species he had once tried to help slaughtering each other over resources and territory. He saw the swarm growing larger every day, an unstoppable tide of hunger and destruction. And he saw in a desperate broadcast to all of Council space, finally saying the words she had sworn she would never say. "We were wrong," she admitted, her silver skin pale with fear. "We were wrong about the humans. We needed them and we did not realize it until they were gone. They were not our servants. They were the only thing holding us together. And now," her voice broke, "now I do not know if we can survive." Minyu turned off the broadcast. He walked outside to his garden, where the blue grass swayed in the evening breeze. The orange sky was beautiful as always, peaceful. He thought about all the years he had spent trying to earn the galaxy's respect. He thought about all the insults he had swallowed, all the humiliations he had endured, all the sacrifices his people had made. And he thought about A's words, "Close the door on your way out." For the first time in his life, Minyu felt no pity for the galaxy. He felt only a cold, quiet satisfaction. They had wanted humanity gone. Now they had their wish. Let them live with it. His communicator buzzed. It was another message from "Father," she wrote. "Something is happening. Command has called an emergency meeting. I think they are finally going to discuss whether we should go back." Minyu read the message 3 times. Then he looked up at the stars, hidden now behind the orange clouds of sunset. "Not yet," he whispered to himself. "Let them suffer a little longer. Let them understand what they lost." It was cruel. He knew it was cruel. But after 300 years of cruelty from the galaxy, he could not bring himself to care. 10 years had passed since humanity walked away from the galaxy. Captain Sara stood on the bridge of the patrol ship Silent Watch, staring at the endless darkness beyond human space. She was 34 years old, born 3 years after the withdrawal. She had never seen Council space. She had never met an alien. Everything she knew about the galaxy came from history books and the stories of older soldiers. But she had seen the refugee ships. They came almost every day now, drifting out of the darkness like ghosts. Some were small, carrying only a few dozen survivors. Others were massive, packed with thousands of desperate people from species she had only read about. They all had the same look in their eyes: fear, exhaustion, and a terrible hope that humanity might save them. Humanity did not save them. "Contact," her sensor officer reported. His name was Han, a young man fresh from the academy. "Vessel, approximately 40,000 kilometers out. They are broadcasting a distress signal." Sora nodded. "How many life signs?" "Scanning now." His face grew pale. "Captain, there are over 8,000 people on that ship. Most of them are children." Sora's jaw tightened. She had seen this before. As the galaxy fell apart, families sent their children away on any ship that could fly, hoping they might find safety somewhere. Anywhere. Most of them died in the void. The lucky ones made it to human borders, where they were given supplies and sent back to a galaxy that no longer had room for them. "Open a channel," Sora said. The flickered and a face appeared. It was a woman, her silver skin dirty and damaged, her eyes red from crying. Behind her, Sora could see rows of small beds filled with sleeping children. "Please," the woman said. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Please help us. They destroyed our world. We have nowhere to go. The children, they have not eaten in days. Please." Sora looked at the woman for a long moment. She thought about her own childhood on Earth, safe and peaceful, surrounded by family and friends. She thought about her mother, who had served in the last war before withdrawal and still had nightmares about it. She thought about all the stories she had heard about how the galaxy had treated humanity. And she thought about 8,000 children who had done nothing wrong. "Prepare a supply transfer," she said to her crew. "Food, water, and medical kits, maximum load." The crew moved quickly. Within an hour, shuttles were crossing the space between the two ships, carrying enough supplies to keep the refugees alive for another month. It was not much. It would not solve anything, but it was something. "Thank you," the woman said, tears streaming down her silver cheeks. "Thank you, you are saving our children." "We are giving you supplies," Sora corrected her gently. "We cannot let you into our space. Those are our orders." The woman's face crumbled. "But where will we go? There is nothing left. The council has fallen. The assembly is gone. They are everywhere. There is nowhere safe." Sora had no answer. There was no answer. The galaxy had destroyed itself, and humanity had decided not to be part of that destruction anymore. "I am sorry," she said, and she meant it. The ship turned and drifted back into the darkness. Sora watched it go, wondering how many of those children would survive the journey to wherever they were going. Probably not many, maybe none. That night she wrote a report to command, as she did every day. She described the refugee ship, the number of survivors, the supplies they had provided, and at the end she added a question she had asked many times before. "How long are we going to watch them die?" She never received an answer. On Earth, life continued as if the galaxy did not exist. Cities grew larger. Technology improved. People were born, lived, and died without ever thinking about the stars. The withdrawal had become ancient history, something children learned about in school and quickly forgot. But some people remembered. Former Ambassador Minyu was 72 years old now. His hair had turned completely white, and his hands shook when he tried to hold a cup of tea. He still lived on Nu, still tended his garden, still watched the orange sunsets. But his mind was never far from the past. His daughter visited him every few months. She had risen through the ranks of the diplomatic corps, becoming one of humanity's foremost experts on galactic politics. It was a strange job, studying species that humanity no longer spoke to, but someone had to do it. "They have reached the core worlds," she told him during her latest visit. They sat on his porch, watching the blue grass wave in the wind. Is dead. She was killed when they breached Council Station." Minyu nodded slowly. He remembered A's arrogance, her cruelty, her dismissal of everything human. He had hated her once. Now he felt only emptiness. "How many are left?" he asked. "Of the original 12 Council species, maybe half. The rest have been consumed by thee or destroyed in the wars." Paused. "Father, there is talk of returning." Minyu looked at her sharply. "Returning to what? There is nothing left to return to. There are still billions of people out there, survivors, refugees, species that had nothing to do with how the Council treated us." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "We cannot just watch them die forever." "We can. We have been doing it for 10 years. And how many more years can we do it? How many more children can we send back into the darkness?" His voice rose. "I know what they did to us. I know they treated us like servants, but we are supposed to be better than them. That is what made us different." Minyu was silent for a long time. He thought about all the years of insults and humiliations. He thought about the soldiers who had died for a galaxy that never thanked them. He thought about his own career, wasted trying to earn respect from species that considered humans inferior. And he thought about his daughter, who had inherited his idealism but not his bitterness. "Maybe you are right," he said finally. "Maybe we should go back, but not as peacekeepers, not as servants. If we return, it must be on our terms. They must understand that things have changed. They must understand that we will never again sacrifice ourselves for those who do not appreciate us." Nodded, that is exactly what Command is discussing. A new arrangement, a new relationship, something equal or we do not return at all. Minyu smiled just a little. It was the first time he had smiled in months. Then maybe there is hope after all. Back on the border, Captain Sara received new orders for the first time in years. She read them twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. "Prepare for diplomatic visitors," the orders said. "A council delegation is being allowed to cross the border. They will be escorted to Luna Station for negotiations. This is not a return. This is a conversation." Sora put down the message and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was burning. Somewhere out there, billions of people were dying. And somewhere out there, humanity was finally considering whether to help them again. But this time, things would be different. This time, humanity would not beg for acceptance. This time, the galaxy would have to prove it deserved to be saved. Sora smiled grimly. "Let them come," she whispered. "Let them see what 10 years without us has done, and let them learn what it will cost to bring us back." Luna Station floated in the darkness between Earth and its moon, a massive ring of metal and glass that served as humanity's gateway to the stars. For 10 years, it had been quiet, its docking bays empty, its corridors silent. But today, for the first time since the withdrawal, alien ships hung in the void outside its walls. Fleet Admiral watched the delegation shuttle approach through the observation window. He was 60 years old, a career military officer who had spent the last decade preparing for a war he hoped would never come. His hair was iron gray, his face lined with the weight of command, and his eyes held no warmth. "3 ships," he said to the woman beside him. "That is all that remains of the mighty council fleet." Stood at his side, dressed in the formal robes of a diplomatic advisor. She was 45 now, no longer the young officer who had patrolled the border and watched refugee ships drift into darkness. She had spent the last 5 years studying what was left of the galaxy, preparing for this moment. "They destroyed most of their military capacity," she said. "These 3 ships represent everything they have left." "Good," his voice was cold. "Let them remember that when they make their requests." The delegation was small. Only 7 representatives had survived the journey to human space, each one speaking for species that were on the edge of extinction. They walked through Luna Station's corridors with wide eyes, staring at the clean walls, the bright lights, the humans who passed by without fear or hunger in their faces. The meeting room was simple. A long table, comfortable chairs, and windows that looked out at Earth's blue-green globe. No decorations, no displays of power. Humanity had nothing to prove. Recognized some of the delegates from her studies. There was Ra, the new leader of the collective, young and desperate where it had been old and arrogant. There was of the Crescent Assembly, the last survivor of his species' ruling council. And there was a named, who had once been a minor ambassador and was now, by default, the voice of his entire civilization. They looked broken, they looked terrified, and when they saw the human leaders waiting for them, they looked ashamed. "Thank you for receiving us," Ra said. Her voice was soft, nothing like A's commanding tone. "We know we have no right to ask for your help. We know how our predecessors treated you, but we had nowhere else to go." Admiral did not sit. He stood at the head of the table, looking down at the delegates like a judge considering criminals. "You had nowhere else to go because you destroyed everywhere else. For 10 years, we watched you tear each other apart. For 10 years, we listened to your distress signals and did nothing. Do you know why? The delegates were silent. Because you asked us to leave, continued. You said you did not need us. You said we were beneath you. You said our deaths did not matter because we bred fast. He paused, letting the words sink in. Those were your exact words, were they not? Ra lowered her eyes. Those were A's words. She is dead now. Most of the leaders who treated you badly are dead. We are what remains. We are trying to be different. Trying is not enough. Finally sat down. You want our help, fine, but you will give us something in return, something real, something that proves you understand what you did wrong. Anything, said quickly. We will give you anything, trade rights, territory, resources, name your price. We do not want your trade rights. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. Leaned forward. We want respect. The room was silent. Watched the delegates exchange confused glances. They did not understand. After centuries of treating humans like servants, they could not imagine what respect would even look like. I will explain, said, speaking for the first time. For 300 years, humanity kept the peace. We sacrificed our soldiers, our resources, our futures to protect a galaxy that never thanked us. We signed treaties that gave us nothing. We accepted insults that would have started wars between any of your species. And we did this because we believed, foolishly, that one day you would see us as equals. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth. That day never came, so we left. And in our absence, you learned a lesson that we tried to teach you for 3 centuries. Peace is not natural. Peace requires work. Peace requires sacrifice. And you were never willing to make those sacrifices yourselves. We understand now, said. His voice was heavy with grief. We understand what you did for us. We were blind and now we see. Words are easy, said. Show us with actions. President Shin entered the room then, having waited to see how the initial conversation would unfold. She was 68 years old, with short white hair and calm eyes that had seen humanity through its decade of isolation. She had been elected on a platform of caution, of waiting, of letting the galaxy prove itself before humanity returned. The Admiral and my advisor have explained our feelings, she said, taking her seat at the table. Now let me explain our terms. If humanity returns to galactic space, we will not return as peacekeepers. We will not bleed for species that do not appreciate us. We will help you rebuild, but you will rebuild alongside us. Every species will contribute soldiers. Every species will share resources. Every species will sacrifice. And if we refuse, Ra asked quietly, then you will die. His voice was not cruel, just honest. They will consume what is left of your civilizations. Within 50 years, there will be nothing left of galactic society except the swarm, and eventually they will come for us too, but we have 50 years to prepare. You have months. The delegates looked at each other. There was no argument, no negotiation, no attempt to find a better deal. They had come to beg and they knew it. We accept, Ra said finally. Whatever terms you offer, we accept. We have no choice. Nodded. Then we have work to do. Ambassador will draft the new compact. Admiral will assess what remains of your military forces. And I will address the human people to explain why we are returning to a galaxy that treated us so badly. Later that night, visited her father on New via a long-distance communication link. Minyu looked tired but alert, his eyes bright with questions. It is done, told him. They agreed to everything. The new compact gives humanity equal standing with all other species combined. We will lead the military response. We will control the reconstruction. And every species will contribute to the peacekeeping force, not just us. Minyu was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile had seen from him in years. 300 years, he said. 300 years of trying to earn respect through service, through patience, through sacrifice. And in the end, all we had to do was walk away. We should not have had to, said. They should have respected us from the beginning. Yes, but they did not. And now they will. Minyu leaned back in his chair. Go save them, daughter. But never let them forget what it cost to bring us back. Never let them forget that humanity walked away and the galaxy fell apart without us. I will not forget, promised, and I will make sure they do not either. In orbit above Luna, Admiral prepared the combined fleet for its first mission beyond human space in 10 years. The ships were larger now, faster, more powerful than anything humanity had fielded before. They had spent a decade preparing for war, and now they were ready. But this was not just war, this was a reckoning. The galaxy would learn what it meant to need humanity, and humanity would finally receive what it had always deserved. Not gratitude, not friendship, but respect. True respect, earned through absence rather than presence. The fleet powered up its engines and moved toward the border. Beyond lay a galaxy in flames, waiting to be saved. This time on their own terms. The sovereign dawn emerged from fold space like a god awakening from sleep. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built, 3 kilometers of metal and fire, designed during the long years of isolation when humanity prepared for a war they hoped would never come. Behind it, the rest of the combined fleet materialized in perfect formation, 200 capital ships, 1,000 support vessels, and enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Admiral stood on the bridge, watching the grow larger on the. He was 55 years old now, commander of all human military forces, the man chosen to lead humanity back into a galaxy that had once dismissed them as servants. His hair was gray, his face hard, but his eyes burned with something that might have been anger or might have been justice. "Report," he said calmly. Captain Sara stood at the tactical station. She had come a long way from patrolling the border and turning away refugees. Now she commanded the fleet's forward assault group, the tip of the spear that would break the swarm. "The enemy fleet is forming up to meet us," she said. "Approximately 800 capital ships, 3 times our number." Nodded. They had grown powerful by consuming entire civilizations, absorbing their technology and their people into the endless hive. They had never faced a real challenge because the council species had been too busy fighting each other to unite against them. That was about to change. "All ships," announced through the fleet-wide communication channel, "this is Admiral. For 10 years we watched the galaxy burn. For 10 years we listened to their cries and did nothing. That was our choice and it was the right choice. We needed to rest. We needed to heal. We needed to remember who we are." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. These were men and women who had grown up in peace, who had never known the endless wars of the old days. But they had trained hard, prepared carefully, and when the call came, they had answered. "Now we return," continued. "Not as servants, not as peacekeepers. We return as humanity, a species that learned to survive, that learned to fight, that learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. They do not know what is coming for them. Let us educate them." The fleet roared in response, thousands of voices united in a single cry of determination. And then the guns began to fire. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human weapons developed during the decade of isolation tore through shields like paper. Human ships, faster and more agile than anything the swarm had encountered, danced around the enemy fleet, striking from every angle. Human soldiers, trained to fight as one, cut through boarding parties with terrifying efficiency. They had never faced an enemy that did not break. They had conquered species that fought back, but those species had been weakened by centuries of depending on human protection. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had spent 10 years preparing for exactly this moment. 6 hours after the battle began, it ended. The fleet was shattered, reduced to drifting wreckage and dying screams. There, the center of the swarm was blockaded. Their expansion, which had seemed unstoppable, had stopped. looked at the tactical display, at the hundreds of enemy ships that had been reduced to debris. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that the job was done. "Prepare the ground assault," he ordered. "We end this today." But the battle for they was only the beginning. Over the following months, humanity moved through what remained of Council space, not as conquerors but as enforcers. They destroyed pirate fleets that had terrorized civilian ships. They broke up wars between species that had been fighting for a decade. They established order where there had been only chaos. And everywhere they went, they made the same demand: join the compact, contribute to the peace, or face the consequences. Most species joined willingly. They had learned, through a decade of suffering, that peace required sacrifice. They had learned that humanity had been right all along. Some species did not join. They clung to old grudges, old hatreds, old beliefs that they could survive on their own. Those species found themselves isolated, cut off from trade and support, left to fend for themselves in a galaxy that no longer tolerated selfishness. Ambassador oversaw the political reconstruction while the military handled the rest. She traveled from world to world, meeting with survivors, negotiating agreements, building something new from the ashes of the old council. She was 60 now, her hair streaked with gray, but her energy was endless. "We are creating something that never existed before," she told her father during one of their regular communications. Minyu was 82, too old to travel, but he watched everything from his house on Nu. A true alliance. Not one species protecting everyone else, but everyone protecting each other. Minyu smiled. He had lived long enough to see his daughter's dream become reality. "I am proud of you," he said. "I am proud of all of us. We walked away and they fell apart. Now we have returned and they are finally learning to stand on their own." "They have a long way to go," admitted. "Centuries of bad habits do not disappear in a year, but they are trying. That is all we can ask." The formal founding of the new Galactic Compact took place on Luna Station, 1 year after humanity's return. Representatives from every surviving species gathered in the same room where the original negotiations had taken place. But this time, they did not come as beggars. They came as partners. President Shin addressed the assembly. She was 69 now, in the final year of her term, but she had insisted on being there for this moment. She had led humanity through the decade of isolation, and she would see the new era begin. 300 years ago, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room, humanity joined the galactic community. We were young, eager, desperate for acceptance. We signed treaties that gave us nothing. We made sacrifices that were never appreciated. We tried to earn your respect through service and patience. She paused, letting the words sink in. We failed. No matter what we did, you saw us as lesser. No matter how many of our soldiers died protecting your worlds, you thanked us with insults. So we left. We walked away, and everything fell apart. The assembled delegates shifted uncomfortably. Many of them had been children during the withdrawal. They had grown up with the consequences of their predecessors' arrogance. Now we have returned, continued, but not as servants, not as peacekeepers who carry the burden alone. We have returned as equals, as partners, as one species among many in a true alliance. From this day forward, peace belongs to all of us. Every species will contribute, every species will sacrifice, and every species will benefit. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. But let me be clear about one thing. We will never forget what happened. We will never forget the insults, the humiliations, the deaths that were dismissed because humans breed fast. We have forgiven, but we have not forgotten. And if any of you ever treat us that way again, if any of you ever take our sacrifices for granted, we will remind you of what the galaxy looked like without us. The room was absolutely silent. We will remind you once finished, only once. The compact was signed that day, a new beginning for a galaxy that had nearly destroyed itself. The swarm was defeated over the following years, pushed back to a small territory where they could be contained. The wars between species ended, replaced by cooperation and mutual defense. Trade flourished. Civilizations began to rebuild. And humanity took its rightful place. Not above the other species, not below them, but among them as equals who had proven their worth through absence rather than presence. Admiral retired after the campaign, returning to Earth to write his memoirs and teach at the military academy. Captain Sora took his place, becoming the youngest fleet admiral in human history. Ambassador continued her work, traveling the galaxy and strengthening the bonds of the compact. And on Nu, Minu sat on his porch and watched the orange sunset, knowing that his life's work had finally been completed. Humanity had walked away. The galaxy had realized that peace was over, and in the end, that simple lesson had changed everything. They would never make that mistake again.